Hello and welcome to Meet the Author with Lehman Library. I'm Derek, and joining me today is Dr. David Montague. Dr. Montague is the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Success at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, as well as a Professor of Criminal Justice. Dr. Montague has also completed federal investigations in law enforcement and intelligence capacities working for the United States Drug Enforcement Administration and served as the senior investigator for the United States JFK Assassination Records Review Board. During his tenure at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, he has founded the UA Little Rock Senior Justice Center and is active as a volunteer reserve police officer for the city of Bryant, Arkansas. He has lectured at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and given academic presentations worldwide. He's written numerous publications about criminal justice. He's here today to share his insights and experience as an author and to read a segment from his new book, Overnight Code: The Life of Raye Montague, the Woman Who Revolutionized Naval Engineering. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, I am so pleased to be here with you. I'm honored to be asked to come and talk about this book about my late mother, and that you all have an interest in sharing it with others.
Well, it's a great honor for us, so thank you so much. I am curious, for this book, you wrote the book with Paige Bowers, and I'm always curious when you've got collaborators. How did this come about? Did you contact her? Did she contact you? And how did the two of you work together to get this book written?
Well, that's a very interesting story. And initially, the book, a lot of people had asked my mother for years to write a book. And she kept saying no one would be interested in it. And they said, it's just about my job. Nobody wants to hear about that. The ship design part might be interesting, but not a book on it. And then finally, the Good Morning America interview happened in 2017. And after that happened, we got a call from a literary agent in New York. And I told her the same thing my mother always said, but I said, I'll be glad to get on a conference call with you if you'd like. And so we did. And, the agent basically said, what you have to realize after people watching you on Good Morning America, this really is not about your job. This really is about how you overcame obstacles and how you achieved and did well in a unique achievement and many others with the Navy, but always reached back to help others. And it's an inspirational story that could really help a lot of people. And so that's when my mother finally agreed to start going on it. So she actually was working on this book project, and Paige Bowers was brought on as a co-author because Paige had history in writing other types of similar work. And it's very noteworthy for her efforts and accomplishments since she's based in Atlanta, Georgia. And so as my mother's health started to decline, we'd gotten through, the proposal and a sample chapter, and literally the same week that she went into hospice and passed is when the proposal was accepted by a publisher. And so one of the last things that my mother and I talked about was because she really wanted the book to kind of continue what she was interested in, which was doing public speaking, inspiring others. And she was hoping the book would be a legacy for her afterward to do the same type of thing. And that's when I told her that, I'm going to make sure this book gets done. And so that was one of the final things that I got a chance to say to her. And she was able to acknowledge, she understood that. And then Paige and I started, talking. In fact, I called Paige literally from the hospital that night when I knew that was it, and we just agreed we were going to muddle through and make it work. And we really got to know each other. We call ourselves the Wonder Twins now. And we, really formed a really great team because, I know how to dig and find, as you talked about my background, I know how to dig and find information. I had access to lots of records, and I had my mother's contact list. And I knew some anecdotal and some real stories, from my childhood growing up, and so I would do the digging, and then Paige was the storyteller. And she would do follow-up interviews and things of that nature. And next thing you know, it started getting pieced together. That's kind of how it worked. And, it's just been, I'm just so glad. This book would not have come to life in the way that it did without that collaboration with Paige.
Well, thank you for letting me know, because that is a great explanation. And so in fact, it's a very interesting explanation of how, because I've always been intrigued by collaborators. Okay. But you used a key word, anecdotal. There are fabulous anecdotes in this book that if you're willing, I'd love to bring up. I think I laughed out loud when you talked about how your mother learned how to drive when she bought the first car. Would you be willing, driving to and from work? It took like 2 hours. I don't want to give the story away. I want you to tell, if you're willing to tell the viewers how that came about and what happened.
Well, the short version of it is, and it's actually covered in the book, but we're talking about, the 1950s and 60s, and so there was anybody familiar with the Washington, D.C. area has probably heard of the Beltway. This is before the Beltway was constructed. And where she worked was in Carterock, Maryland, which took quite a while to get to, and it was in the hours working in a computer lab. She worked in a mathematics lab in a computer room at this government facility. It's very hard to get to unless you have a car. And so, she really realized that she needed to work longer hours and odd hours, because at that time, unlike today, people just didn't have access to get on the computer anytime they wanted. They had to get computer time because the computers were limited in how much they could process. And so you had to have enough computer time to be able to get certain job runs done. I mean, that just sounds incomprehensible now, but that's the way it was. And so in order to get that computer time, she needed to ask for additional hours at work, and she needed to run these projects. But she didn't have a car. So she went out and bought herself, I forgot, it was a Pontiac, I think it was. And she didn't know how to drive. And the dealership actually brought it to the house, the salesperson. And so what she was doing was getting up in the early hours, the late hours of the night after everybody's come home from work. She would go in and work the graveyard shift, and then wait for the traffic to die down after rush hour, and then leave. And a lot of people were thinking, gosh, she just really stays a long time. And she was really trying to let the traffic die down because she didn't know how to drive. She had never taken a driving class, didn't have a driver's license, but she was determined because she knew that if she didn't do these extra job projects, she wouldn't be able to get promoted. So finally, she went down to Arkansas for a funeral from Washington, D.C., and she just happened to talk to somebody who worked in the Department of Motor Vehicles there, and they just happened to mention, hey, did you ever get your driver's license, Ray? And she's like, no. I said, well, do you want one? And she was like, well, yeah. And at that time, they didn't have photos on your ID. They just made one up and another current address and gave it to her. And that was it. And she brought it back to Washington. It was accepted by motor vehicles here. Didn't have to do a driving test, and all that. And so she showed up at work and was showing up her driver's license, and everybody was just laughing. And her boss came up and said, "What is the big deal? You've been driving up here to work." Well, I just had to get a promotion, and said, "You've been driving on a military base with no drivers." Said, "I'll do whatever I have to get the job done."
Yeah.
And that's the story of how she learned how to drive.
Well, like I said, it was just humorous how it looked like 2 hours she drove very slowly because she was just teaching herself. Yes, it was hilarious. Yes.
She loved telling that story because, she loves driving. But she loved driving when she finally got more comfortable with it. But she literally was afraid she was going to crash, and she would inch along. And luckily, she never got pulled over or anything.
Okay. I am curious. I think your book is filled with photographs. But to me, the photograph on the cover is the most beautiful, and I realize your mother would not want to necessarily be recognized for her beauty, but it's just a beautiful photograph, and with her working on, looks like a ship. Would you explain to the audience what this picture, if you know what it is, what the picture was? I just think it was well taken.
Well, thank you. It is an official Navy photo. I don't know if you need to put it up on the, on your thing, but the Navy would normally take a lot of different photos of people generally for different events, people that worked in various offices. They had, a newsletter that would go out, and that's how they collected photos. So it was not uncommon to have Navy photographers coming through and taking photos. And I don't know the circumstances exactly of this particular photo, but I do know that it was taken in Hydesville, Maryland.
Okay.
And at that time, Naval Sea Systems Command was located in Hydesville, Maryland, which is just a few blocks over the Washington, D.C. line. And so this is obviously a picture of her at her desk. I've been to that office many times as a child.
Okay.
And I remember this placard in the back. I still have it, as a matter of fact. I've donated to the Arkansas Center for History and Culture.
Okay.
But yeah, she worked on a lot of these models, these ship models. And the reason I love this picture and picked it is because I have vivid memories as a child visiting the Carter Rock facility, where she had learned how to drive, and they actually have a tank there. It's like a mile long or something. It's really, and they would put, or half mile long, and they would actually put models of prototype ships in there to see if they could, stand tests. Same thing they do for airplanes.
Okay.
They have a wind tunnel type thing. And I remember just running around there. So when we looked through a lot of these Navy photos, there were lots of them of her speaking and things like that. But I like this one because it shows her focused. It shows, that she's doing something that's rather unusual. She is using, a slide there, and she's where she got her start in the mathematics lab.
Okay.
So that's why I think this picture is very interesting.
Okay. I want the audience to know, in the sense that one of the significant aspects of this book, from what I inferred, I think it's clearly stated, is the struggles that your mother had advancing in her career. And at times it was because of her gender. At times it was probably because of being African American. But to me, and you can contradict me because you wrote the book and you knew your mother's struggles, but to me, it seemed to me the biggest issue was because she didn't have a degree in engineering, and she was dealing with people who probably couldn't accept the fact that this woman is just blessed with talent on knowing how to do things. So could you comment on that so that the audience gets an idea of why this book is significant?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question as well. I like it a lot because I would have to say that it's all three. My grandmother, Flossie McNeil, who really was an inspiration to my mother, Ray, used to always tell her as a child, there's no such thing as men's work or woman's work. There's just work.
Yes.
And that she had to understand that because a lot of people thought that when World War II ended, the world is free and this kind of thing. Of course, we still hadn't gotten to the apex of the civil rights movement either at that point. But growing up, my mother used to hear all the time from my grandmother that she has 3 strikes against her no matter how she's feeling about the world, and not to feel discouraged, but understand that there are some people that are going to give her a hard time because she was from the segregated South, and the fact that she was a woman, and the fact that she was an African-American person. So the segregated South meant the unequal access to education, and that the education was a key. So I would say that, to answer your question, she received a lot of static from people over the decades for her gender. She received a whole lot of it as well because of her race. And quite frankly, I think that not having an engineering degree was really just icing on the cake for some people. You know what I mean? Because she was very talented. A lot of folks, coming from Arkansas, their teachers, especially in the segregated school system, at the black schools, the teachers would go off in the summer and they would take these graduate courses, come back, and they bring the graduate level books back. And that's what they were sharing, because at the black schools, the kids were getting secondhand books from the white schools. So she did run into, like I said, icing on the cake is a good way to describe it, because for some people it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But quite frankly, even without an engineering degree, she did earn a professional engineering license. She was a registered professional engineer in the state of California. She was one of the first women to be licensed as a professional engineer in California. She was one of the first in Canada to be registered as a professional engineer. And honestly, and that's why she always used to emphasize, and this is an addition to your question, that it's so important to not only get your credentials the best you can, but to always stay on top of professional development.
Yes.
Because what she noticed was a lot of the people that would try to dismiss her at professional conferences and in business meetings, and when she would try to review technical specifications, and she understood building computers up, she understood all the system dynamics theories and everything. She was teaching at the Naval Academy on hull design for naval midshipmen, but once she got that professional engineering license, that's when she was able to shut a lot of people down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So.
Along those same lines, there was a story, and I don't have all the details in my mind, but there was one program she had to work on, and they thought it would take like 2 or 3 months, and she got it done in one weekend. Am I correct?
Well, that's the second one. The first one was the ship specification project.
Yes, and then the other one was ship design. Is that am I correct?
The ship specification project was before, and what my mother didn't know, she had a racist boss, and that's how she referred to him. He's covered in here too. And, she did not realize that she was given this task. Her boss was telling everybody else it was an impossible task. And the reason he referred to it that way is because they had a team working on it without her knowledge for about 6 months. Now, they had made some progress, but they knew some things about it, but not everything. And to put it in perspective for viewers watching this, it would be like someone understanding how to use their cell phone, but not really understanding the technology behind the cell phone. She knew both because she went to night classes to teach herself computing when she was working at Carter Rock as well. And so, that boss gave her that project, and so my mother, just dug right in, and she finally realized that, we need additional resources on this. So she actually contacted a group, Rosenblatt and Sons, I think it was, in New York, and went up there because they had done some work on the project, and then figured out that the people that were at the Navy working on this project did not realize that the folks at New York had gotten a little further along. They just didn't have the pieces really put together the right way, is a good way to describe it. So she literally, on the Navy's dime, went up to New York, checked in a hotel, and stayed for a long time to work with this group in New York and figured out how to make it. And essentially what this project was what is the possibility of creating a computer program that could theoretically design a naval ship? So she created that, brought it back, and then she was so excited. She showed it to her boss, and she was like, okay, I'm ready for you to give me a real ship. And basically he said, I'm not going to give you a real ship. I didn't think you were going to be able to do that. I thought you were going to fail, and I was going to fire you. So that's how that happened. Now, the other project is when she finally ended up getting an opportunity to use that initial project. And do you want the story on that part?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So
we have time, don't we? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you think of the 1970s, and there, we're still in the Cold War, right? And my mother had this project. She was feeling, like her career is just kind of stagnating at this point. She was doing a lot of good things, but she really wanted to do ship design. And so President Nixon at the time, who was president, wanted to have was concerned about the Soviet Union and the ability to build a fleet of ships quickly. And so he ordered the Navy to look at what do we need to do to pull out all stops to just do what we have to make sure we can compete, in case there's this, we don't want to be in trouble with the Soviet Union if they try to attack us or threaten us. And so the President Nixon had sent a team, my mother always referred to them as the brass, to travel around and try to figure out, is there a way we can speed up the process of designing a U.S. naval ship? And the process at that time was very tedious. You had to literally draw things out, like, you've seen a blueprint before. And the process took about 2 years. 2 years.
Wow.
And so they came to her one day in the office, and the only reason that they did, and she had no idea, so they just showed up one day and talked to her boss, and they said to her this is a different boss, we understand that you have someone here that's worked on a prototype of the possibility of designing a ship with a computer. And they said, yeah, she's right over here. And they went back to her and said, we've got this assignment from the president, and he's given us 2 months to find an answer for this. We're going to give you 1 month, because if you fail, we've got to see what other alternative we can do. So she thought about it, and the holiday weekend was coming up, and she said, I have designed a program, and I've never done anything like this in real life, but quite frankly, if you give me all the resources I need, if I can't get it to work over that holiday weekend, then it would be a waste of the Navy's time and money to keep looking at me, and I would want you to be able to do what you need to for our country. So she said, if I can't get it done this weekend, then you can have it back. And so she came in that weekend and was able to get it to run in 18 hours and 26 minutes.
Yes, that's the story.
That's the story.
Yes.
That was the overnight code.
Yes, that was impressive, really was. Now, did you help her on any programs or anything? I don't know why I've got that in my notes. Maybe I misread something, but you didn't. Did you help her in anything that you did or that she did?
I went with her when she would get awards and things like that.
All right. Then I must have been confused.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And I'm a social scientist. I've always grown up around technology.
Okay.
Before my current job, I used to run online learning for university and grew up around technology. But what you probably read was when I was a kid, I was a single, my mother was a single parent. And my father left when I was 9 weeks old. And my grandmother sold her beauty salon here in Arkansas.
Yes.
And moved up to Washington, D.C. to help my mother so she could work, longer hours and things like that. But a lot of the time, she was having to work such long hours. She didn't want us there. She didn't want to be in the office by herself. And they had rules against that back then.
Okay.
And so she said, okay, well, you just say I have to have somebody in the office. I'm going to bring my mother and my son to the office. Yeah. And so I was about 4 years old when she started bringing me to work. And I would come a lot and spend a lot of nights at the Navy, And my mother would do crossword. My grandmother would do crossword puzzles. My mother was working. I was, doing coloring and reading and kind of playing and stuff, and then would fall asleep. But after a while, we kept coming up there, and I kept being curious about all the technology and everything. She taught me how to program. So I was doing programming, in BASIC when I was 4.
Wow.
But am I a computer scientist? No.
Okay.
And she used to always say to me, because a lot of people want to know, did I feel like I needed to be an engineer like her? And she was always very adamant in saying, son, I don't expect you to be, she used the term computer Nick, meaning like computer geek type thing. However, you do have to know how to use technology, because whether you like it or not, it's going to stay here. And she was right, because I've used it in investigations, I've used it as a professor, I've used it as a university administrator, all my life. And it's just another tool to get things done.
She must have been a wonderful person, really.
She did believe in valuing others, and that was a huge part And I actually have a section in here I can read to you. But
When you finish that, then we'll segue to that.
and she used to always make it clear to me and to others, that she learned from her the negative experiences that she dealt with, that from multiple perspectives, gender, race, segregation, all these different things, that the importance of valuing everybody. And she didn't feel that it was appropriate that to come to have the wrong approach or opinion about somebody based on silly things. I mean, things that aren't really about, race, gender, orientation, religion, national order. It's like they're just people. And so she always felt that it was important to make sure that we're looking for what people can bring to the table and not try to find ways to exclude them from the table. So I think that's an important lesson for a lot of folks, and what she made clear to me, and the same message to everybody else. And she did this in Arkansas prisons when she went to lecture there, and to children's groups and so forth, that it's important to, if you want to advance in your career, it's important to understand, to value everyone, but understand you're going to deal with a lot of people that don't value you, and you have to find ways to work around them as often as you can, knowing you're not always going to succeed. But the best way to get them is to just play chess, is what she used to always say. Think 3 or 4 moves ahead of them and just outsmart them. By the time they realize what's happened, you've already moved on to the next thing, and you can laugh about it later.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. Montague, if you're willing, if you will read a section, the audience would love to hear, a part of the book, and I think you've got a couple that you've selected.
Sure. I have one, and I'll give a little context. One is from the 1960s, but actually, I have a picture in here as well I can show. But it's about when she was working at the David Taylor Model Basin, which is where that first computer lab, that applied mathematics lab, was in Carter Rock, Maryland, that I keep referring to. And the major computer, people have heard of like Crays and other types of supercomputers. The big computer for that time period was called the LARC, the LARC, right? And they had one at the Applied Mathematics Laboratory in 1961. And I actually have a picture of her as the only person of color and the only woman there. But I wanted to just kind of read this little clip that kind of brings a few of the different variables you brought up in your questions together. But the time period I wanted to emphasize is the 60s. And for context, think of this as being inside the computer lab area itself, where at that time only engineers, quote, quote, engineers, were able to touch anything or qualified to touch anything. So Ray was in the thick of things and was the only person who knew how to operate the machine. That's because a lot of people called in sick. Her boss, she said, knew nothing about the computer. I resented it, but that's the way she was at the time. She said people were bypassing my boss and coming straight to me to solve their computer issues. Eventually, my boss resigned because he got sick of it. Ray said she was asked to replace that boss on an interim basis. If everything worked out well, she was told she would be promoted to 2 GS levels higher than she was. That's a government scale, within 6 months or after 6 months. Ray decided to take her manager, Jack Smith, up on the offer. For the next half year, she ran 3 shift operations and taught people how to debug the LARC. When it came time to receive the promotion she was promised, Ray was told that it would not happen because there was a salary freeze. Ray said she looked around and saw others in the office getting promoted. Then she asked her boss, was there a hiring freeze for some people but not others? And he said to me, I gotta be honest, you got the right name, but you're the wrong sex. He said he could not, this is her quote, he said he could not stand women in supervisory positions, but they really needed me and hoped I would stay. He told me, I wish the guys worked as hard as you do. Raye said she went back into the computer room and began filling out new job applications immediately, and word got out around the office that she was looking for a new job. The head of software systems development was named Betty Holberton, and she approached Raye and asked if she would come work for her. Holberton is an icon within computer lore. And she was instrumental in developing the UNIVAC computer, which is at the Smithsonian, right? And saw potential in Raye. And she disapproved of the way Raye had been treated. She planned to take Raye under her wing, but the transition did not go smoothly. So long story short, she had to take a test. And I'll read the rest of the part. I scored a 95 on this test, Raye said. So when we showed it to personnel, they told Betty Holberton that they knew I was scoring high, but they had never had a non-mathematician or non-engineer working as a systems analyst or systems developer, and they didn't want to establish a precedent for that now. When you're coming back to your thing about having the professional connection. Mm-hmm. Frustrated, Betty Holberton asked the personnel staff to pull her own file. When they did, they saw that she had a journalism degree when at the time that she had helped develop the ENIAC computer, which was used to study the feasibility of the hydrogen bomb. Needless to say, Raye was transferred to Betty Holberton and was promoted to systems analyst.
Well.
I love that.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is so brilliant. All right. Well, this has been a tremendous honor, Dr. Montague. But before we end, if viewers want to purchase a copy of your book, how can they get a copy?
There are multiple ways to get a copy. It's actually available in hardback. It's also available through Amazon as a Kindle e-reader, and there's also an audiobook as well. Locally, Pyramid Bookstore has been selling a lot of them. And I'm trying to remember the name. I forgot the name of the other one that's over in the Heights.
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Wordsworth, okay. Pyramid Books and Wordsworth Books that are local bookstores, and I always believe in supporting local establishments, have also been big supporters. But you can find the book in so many different places, even at Target and a few others. So I definitely encourage anyone, in terms of who is it appropriate for. I think anyone that's high school age and up.
You don't have to have an engineering degree to understand this book, because
it's really designed to be an inspiration to others, and it's about overcoming obstacles and learning to do so while also holding on to the notion that it's important to give back to others, and that's what she really believed in. And here's the irony for your viewers, is that here it is, she passed in 2018, and she would relentlessly, when she would go out and do public speaking or just meet people randomly and ask them about school, because she believed education was the key. She's been gone since 2018. People still contact me at UALR to ask how they can go to school.
Well.
And some of them have.
Well, that's a fabulous legacy. It really is. All right. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. If you're interested in reading more from Dr. Montague, please visit us at the library or find us online at our website, laymanlibrary.org. Please join us again next time, and have a great day, everyone.